Hi everyone, I'm Dina with Mills Family Gardening. We live in North Texas, Zone 8A. Today is March 7th, and in this video we'll be talking about interplanting or intercropping. Interplanting is growing different varieties of vegetables or flowers in the same bed, in-ground bed or raised bed at the same time. They can be planted at the same time and grow together throughout the growing season, or one variety can be planted while the other is finishing its growing cycle. Interplanting can be done between perennials and perennials, perennials and annuals, or annuals and annuals. For example, in this in-ground bed, you can see we have a lot of beautiful daffodils that are about to open up, and we're in the beginning of March. Not all of them have opened up, so they will be here for a few weeks. But you can also see that in between them, these are larkspurs that came up on their own from last year's plants that dropped seed. They survived our winter, our cold freeze, and they've come up and now they're growing nicely. And you can see that larkspurs, like all these plants here, they're not very tall yet. So while daffodils are still blooming, larkspurs will be growing up. And when the daffodils are done blooming, larkspurs will grow much taller and they'll be blooming while the daffodils are not. After daffodils are done blooming, I do not cut them to the ground. I leave them in the ground the way they are and I let them die naturally. And as they're dying, their foliage does not look very pretty, and that is why larkspurs, they will cover them up a little bit and make the bed look much nicer. And this is a really nice way to have a beautiful flower bed year after year without too much work, because daffodils are perennial flowers, larkspurs, they reseed themselves easily, and so do zinnias. So if you let all these flowers bloom and go to seed, then all their seed will come up the following year and the cycle will repeat. Last year I planted clematis in this container. It did not bloom, but I kept watering it. I did not think it would survive our freeze when our temperature went down to 11 degrees Fahrenheit 2 nights in a row, but nevertheless it survived. You can see 2 little new clematis plants picking from the ground, and they'll be growing and hopefully blooming this year. But while clematis does not look very impressive, I decided to plant nasturtiums on the side of this container, and they'll be blooming soon. They usually grow pretty fast. They're cool weather flowers, and here in North Texas we grow nasturtiums in early spring and then they die off in the summer. So while clematis is not blooming yet, nasturtiums are occupying this container and hopefully we'll see their bloom soon. We can also do interplanting with vegetables. You can see in this in-ground bed we have a few cabbages, broccoli, and cauliflower that I planted a few days ago. They're growing nicely. But in between the rows of broccolis and cabbages, this space is pretty large. So we can use this space to grow a vegetable that grows quickly. In this case, it would be radishes. We can plant radishes in between all these cabbages and broccolis. So I'm going to plant them at about 1/4 of an inch deep, at a space of about 8 inches apart, because green radishes are large in size. So interplanting is a really good way to utilize a very small garden space. If you have a small backyard or just a couple of raised beds and you would like to grow as many vegetables or as many flowers in your garden, then interplanting is a really good way to do it. Today is March 29th and our daffodils have wilted. They're not blooming anymore, but you can see that larkspurs are getting taller and pretty soon they'll be blooming because they're covered in flower buds. And also I planted some cosmos that I started from seed in between daffodils. They're still pretty low, but as they're going to be growing, they'll get taller and eventually they'll be more visible. Our green radish seedlings have come up and they are getting bigger. Some of them did not come up because the seeds were old, so this year I really need to harvest new seeds from these green radishes. But you can also see that cabbage leaves are getting much larger and starting to cover the seedlings of green radishes. Today is April 20th and our daffodils are done blooming, but you can see that larkspurs are blooming so beautifully with various colors and shades. And also you can see that there's lower larkspurs, younger plants. They're not blooming yet, but they're coming up. I see some tiny plants of larkspur down there, but you can see that I planted cosmos here. I thought this variety would be much taller because normally cosmos get really tall. They can get about my height, but this variety stays pretty low, so it was a mistake on my part to plant them here. Today is May 4th and our larkspur is blooming very well. We have some pink, purple and white colors, and you can see that the daffodils that used to bloom here, their greens are a little bit flat on the ground because of all the rain and wind that we got, and larkspur is similar, it's kind of leaning over because of all the rain and wind. But overall, this area looks much prettier with the larkspurs growing. If I left this area alone with only daffodil leaves on the ground, it wouldn't look as pretty. When we first started gardening about 15 years ago, our backyard looked so big, the trees were small, and we thought we had so much space to plant everything. But after we started gardening and our trees are getting much bigger and creating more shade, we have this limited space. That is why we have to be frugal with our space and do interplanting to grow one variety of flowers with the other to increase the space that we have. In this container, I did some interplanting also. Originally, we had white pansies growing here over the winter and early spring. And then I planted gomphrena in here. Gomphrena is a heat-loving annual flower. By the time it gets very hot, by the end of May, and it will be time to cut down the pansies. And after I cut down the pansies, I'm hoping that gompphrenas will be large enough to fill up this container. In this row, you can see we have a lot of cool weather vegetables and herbs like dill, and we have kale and Swiss chard in the back. And while they were growing, all these zinnias sprouted on their own from last year plants that dropped seeds. And now you can see that these zinnias are growing much larger now that it's warming up. They're much happier. I did not plant any of these zinnias, and nevertheless, these zinnia seedlings are growing happily with all the other plants in the same garden bed. And our radishes are actually growing well, but you can see that the cabbages have gotten so big that their leaves are creating a lot of shade for our radishes, and the radishes are not getting that much sun. So when you do interplanting, keep in mind that your plants that need full sun, they need to have enough space to actually get that sunlight. The radishes are on the small side. They're supposed to get larger, but I'll wait as long as I can before they bolt and go into seed and start flowering, because then they won't grow at all. So I'll give them more time and hopefully they will get larger. This is our onion patch, and last year after we harvested our onions, I grew some melons, and those melons stayed on the ground and their seeds germinated this year. And I can see some volunteer melon plants that I did not plant this year. This is one of them, and you can see that they're happily growing in between our onions. So we are going to make sure to harvest our onions carefully, not to damage the roots of this melon, and this melon will keep growing after we harvest the onions. So if you have a small garden space, you can easily maximize it by practicing interplanting. It's been working for us for several years now. I hope it works for you too. Thank you so much for watching this video, and happy gardening!